Okay, it looks like we are now live. Welcome to episode number 30 of the Ramsey Dewey Podcast, featuring the one, the only, Red Chucks. If you don't know who this man is, go check out his channel. Links in the description down below. He's an awesome dude, an expert at breaking things that don't want to be broken, such as bricks and, bending hammers and things like that over his shin. Tough dude. Some great videos you should definitely go check out. Heavily underrated YouTube channel. Welcome back, Jordan. How you doing, man?
Oh, great. I am here in my lovely car. It is about 36 degrees outside. Kids are asleep. But I wanted to join you on this awesome podcast day. You're doing podcasts by night. I'm doing podcasts by early morning. So it's, it's an interesting life right now.
Yeah, man. People always ask me what it's like living in China. Well, it's like living 14 hours in the future. Well, depending on your time zone. It's time traveling, man. And let me tell you about the future. It's glorious. We got flying cars and hoverboards. No, we don't have any of that, but it is pretty cool.
That reminds me, so my wife had never seen Back to the Future, right? And so
yeah.
I remember watching that movie, and I think the year is 2020. And when I was a kid, it was me and my cousin. We were watching that movie, and the hoverboards, the hover cars. I was like, oh man! And I think they had like Jaws like 300D or something, and it was all. And I was like, man, if 2020 is that's cool. And then now that I'm here, I'm like, God, the movie's light.
Yeah, man, it's not the future we were expecting. Maybe it's not the future we deserve, but it's a future, and it is what we make of it. Wasn't that the lesson Doc Brown tried to teach Marty? The future is what you make of it, Marty.
Yeah,
is what he said at the end of that movie. So, yeah, a lot of people are complaining about their circumstances, but what does a man do? He pulls himself up by the bootstraps, and he makes out of life what he makes out of life. And that's one thing I love about your channel is it's really, to me, about the art of manliness, which is something that is, unfortunately, there are fewer and fewer great role models of manliness in the world out there. And it's so much more than speaking with a gruff voice and having a beard and being a biological male or whatever. It has to do with grit, with determination, with work. Now, you posted something recently on Instagram that really caught my attention. Like, you're a really strong guy, and a lot of people ask you, like, how do you get so strong? How do you get your numbers up on the deadlift and the squat or whatever? And you juxtaposed working out in the gym with actual physical labor, and you're like, guys, it's physical labor. Like, tell us a little bit about that.
So I've been kind of working physical jobs since about 15 or 16. I got out of school early. I initially dropped out, and then I graduated early, got a GED, all that stuff, and I jumped into the workforce. So for me, physical labor has always been a part of my job. I was a stonemason. I've worked as a ranch hand. I've also worked as a logger, arborist, so that's essentially doing fine tree work, climbing up 70 feet, carrying a 30-pound chainsaw on you, or falling, a 70-foot oak that is 6 by 6 in diameter, where the rounds are literally so big you have to quarter them into 300-pound pieces. So quartering is where you take a round and then you cut it literally into quarters, and those quarters are 300-pound pieces. And then you pick that up and then you load that into a truck. So I tell people, you touched on a little bit on your last podcast with Zach. He was talking about doing a little bit every day. As a laborer, okay, you can go to the gym and you can work out as hard as you want for an hour, right? And some guys go in there and they kill it and they see good progress with that. You cannot do that in a physical labor job. Like if you're a cowboy, if you're working these long hours, I remember even in tree service, some days we'd get stuck. We'd have a problem with the chipper. The chipper would break down. Then you'd have to take apart the chipper and fix it. Something stupid like that. Yeah. Anyways, you'd be working 10 hours, dragging brush in hot, sometimes really hot weather. It would get up to 105 sometimes, and you're dragging brush up and down hills. Or it'd be below freezing, 28 degrees, 29 degrees. So you're bearing this super cold. Your body is shivering so hard you can't feel your fingers. And then on top of it, you're trying to pick up these logs, and you're just like all seized up. So the idea, I approach, life. There's a lot of guys, specifically in construction, and it's not all the time, but a lot of times, a lot of guys don't have humility. And what I mean by that is they only want to build. So they'll like cut wood, right? And they'll throw their pieces on the ground, or they won't sweep, or they won't, they look at digging holes. Oh, that's below me. That's below me. So the job I do requires a sense of humility in the fact that I'm willing to do it. But like for the past 2 days, I was taking, we did these things called mock-ups. Essentially a mock-up is like, where you build something so the homeowner can look at it and be like, I like this design or I like that design, whichever one, and then you destroy it. And then, if they like it, you save it. If they don't, you destroy it. So we did a couple of mock-ups for these stairs that are going down from this giant pool down to the hot tub. Anyways, they're like, oh, we like this mock-up. We didn't like this one. So there's a mock-up of concrete. Obviously, you can't just toss it as this giant thing. You got to break it up and get rid of it, dispose of it.
Yeah.
So I brought my 20-pound sledge. This is high-density concrete. The first guy he brings out, he's got this little mini, it was like a Makita brand jackhammer, electrical powered jackhammer. It wasn't a 90-pounder. It was like 30 pounds or something. And I'm chipping away at this thing, and I'm like, man, this thing is going slow. So I bust out with my sledgehammer, and I smash this thing, I just let out all my aggression, smash it. Then I take those rocks, I put them in a bucket, but it's at the back end of a pool, right? So I got to walk down this path with this bucket on my shoulder, and then I got to walk up this path towards this area where I'm dumping it. So it's literally like a downhill and then an uphill because the house kind of sits in the middle of all these rolling hills. So anyway, I posted this because the point is, people are like, what do you do to get strong? My job requires that I'm strong. People forgot, like carpenters back in the day, if you were milling wood, there were no mills. You were milling by hand. You were cutting by hand. Yeah. You were chopping by hand. So you have all these guys with power tools, and they're like, oh, I'm not, and they don't want to do physical labor anymore. And I get it. Some people are like, oh, that's below me. And it's like, okay, that might be below you, but it's not below me. It all pays the same for me. So it's like Mr. Miyagi said, everything is karate, right? That for me, it's one of the truest things. There's lots of easy ways to do stuff. People could go up to a car and jack up a car. I can pick up the back end of a truck. What do you know? I posted, that was another thing, like on Instagram, I posted, my buddy's got this little four-cylinder truck, and he's like, oh, I don't, and so I picked up his truck. He was like, mouthing off to me, and we were messing around. So as he was getting ready to leave, I walked over to the back of his truck and picked his truck off the ground. I was like, you're not going anywhere. And so it was funny, but that same instance of picking up that truck, I was driving on back roads, and this guy, his car had broken down. Same thing. It was a little 4-cylinder car, and he didn't have a jack. And sure enough, guess what I did? He had a spare tire in the back of his car, and all I did was pick up the front of his truck. We slid the tire under. I put his other tire and cranked down the bolts just so he could get far enough to, call someone and get a tire change. So the point is, like I've said before, technology is a good thing. It's not a bad thing, but at the same time, strength will always be a necessity. No matter what you think. And this, I've talked about it even in self-defense. Yeah. I was talking with my buddy, and he's a real big gun guy, right? He's very avid in guns. And I said, okay, so you got two guys, and they both got guns. I was like, let me ask you this. how are soldiers trained? And he looks at me, he's like, he's pondering. I said, think about it. A soldier, even an elite soldier, trains his body physically. He knows how to use guns. He knows how to use explosives. He knows all this stuff. Then why is his body still physically trained? Why is he still strong? Why is he fit to do these tasks? Because at the bottom line, it's like having your baseline. It's like if your baseline's out of 10 and then you add a +5 gun hat, a +5, body armor hat, you have 10 and now you have another +10. Now you're at 20. So if a guy has a baseline of 3 and you give him the 5 and the 5, you still can run faster than him. You can still take the high ground faster than him. You can still go long distance, carry more ammo, all of these things. The reason Arnold Schwarzenegger killed the Predator was because he was big and strong. He wouldn't have been able to carry a machine gun otherwise.
You're saying he didn't just have plot armor. It was the physical fitness. But yeah, man, you're absolutely right. Why would you not bring every physical advantage you could possibly have into a fight or an armed conflict where your life is on the line? It would make no sense to do otherwise. And yet, again, we are so accustomed to the easiness of the way that civilization provides, that technology provides to make things easier. And so, I mean, how many times have I heard, and you've probably heard it so many times when you make a martial arts video, somebody says, well, I just get a gun. And okay, yeah, but why not have the gun and also have other options as well?
This goes back. I read a lot about mixed martial arts. We talked about Anthony Smith, right, and the intruder in his home. On my Instagram, again, somebody tried to break into John Jones's car. John Jones, but pound for pound, okay, one of the best fighters in the world right now, undeniably.
Oh yeah.
Who can say whatever they want
just
about
absolutely murk most human beings in a fight.
Yeah, right. Really great fighter. He ran out there with a freaking shotgun, okay, and he has a trained attack dog. So my point is, I had called this before. I said, with Anthony Smith and there's certain people have this mentality. John Jones is one of those guys. He knows, hey, this is a day and age of guns, and I have a gun and I have a dog. But at the same time, he does not neglect his physical at all. People even say he uses super physiological things like steroids. So he even takes it above and beyond, whether or not that's been proven or not. He even goes above and beyond what is even normal. So even him as the best trained fighter, whatever people want to call him, the GOAT, the greatest of all time, there's even pictures of Khabib with a gun. It's like you look at these guys. They have all
Valentina Shevchenko, man, she's a huge proponent of firearms, an expert marksman, in fact.
Yeah, Icy Mike, one of our friends here on YouTube. So you have all these
and I think the big commonality there is that these are people who have been in fights, and they understand you get in an unarmed conflict, you get hurt. If you get into a fist fight, you are going to get punched. You're going to take damage. And if you're not being paid for that, if you're not being paid handsomely to get into an octagon and scrap in front of a crowd of people and get a big chunk of that revenue, why on earth would you do that without every physical, mechanical advantage you could possibly have? So it makes perfect sense that the first thing John Jones would do is get his shotgun and chase that bad guy down with it, as opposed to trying to go after him with his fists.
Yeah.
He understands the consequences of violence.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing, like, even, at the end of the day, even with all your training, if John Jones had run out there, right, let's say he had run out there and he was not armed, and it's like, oh, I'm just going to use the fist, and the other guy, John Jones is not bulletproof. Nobody's bulletproof, and he understands that. And if the other guy was trained for whatever reason and had there's so many things. People live in this fantasy world, and I'm like, dude, that's not that's not how it works. I'm sorry, that's not how it works. Like, I did a video recently, jiu-jitsu for self-defense, because you were talking about jiu-jitsu for MMA and jiu-jitsu for jiu-jitsu. Now, jiu-jitsu for self-defense is a whole nother spectrum of jiu-jitsu, you know. I was saying, you did one, so there was that video you did where you were grappling with the 4 guys, right? And they're all trying to take you down. I explained, I said, you take the best jiu-jitsu practitioner in the world, the best of the best of the best. If you put 4 guys against them, not in grappling, now I'm not saying you couldn't potentially somehow submit 4 guys if it was only grappling.
Yeah, like
rules.
4 guys actually trying to kill you. That's a different story.
Exactly.
By any means necessary.
Yes. So I said, you have 4 guys you never want to grapple in that situation. I said, striking will always be better for the single reason of standing up and being able to move around. And that right there, you know.
I personally rephrase that as you'd never want to tie up. Because grappling it encompasses a lot more than just tying up with people. Like hand fighting, for example. That's a form of grappling. Like pushing somebody is a form of grappling.
Yeah, standing up and clinching. If you can avoid that at all cost, and you can stick and move, 4 guys, if you just know how distance, then it becomes a one-on-one in positioning. And I've seen 4 guys get knocked out. I have never seen 1 guy out-grapple 4 guys. Never seen that happen. But I've seen plenty, and I've researched it time and time and time again. Does that mean just throw jiu-jitsu out the window? No, but it does mean that you got to think like, okay, you know, what's really better here? If you can keep your distance and manage your distance and run, and same goes for ground and pound, because I'm an advocate of, if you get a guy on the ground, just focus on punches, kicks, knees, because you don't have to think, you don't have to position. You went over that in your video. But even on the street, if I throw a guy on the ground, I'm not going to full mount him. I'm going to step on him. Like, why am I going to put myself at a position where I'm now on the ground with you? If you're on the ground and I'm above you, I'm the horse right now, and you're the mouse. I'm going to trample on you, because that makes more sense, you know?
Yeah, man, that's a situation where a position like knee mount goes from being a useful option, like it is in mixed martial arts, to a preferable option, where when you have a knee mount position, you can strike the down fighter, but you can also dismount instantly, get back up on your feet, run, look around you, observe your surroundings, and so on. Whereas full mount, I mean, you can get up, but you're more tied up with the guy.
Oh yeah, I mean, just both your knees are on the ground. You know, having just one foot to push off and be able to stand up, you get blindsided, hit from the side, something happens, you're able to get up quicker. Or if you just stay standing all together, kick and move, then that's good too. So it's like there's so many factors, and I try to explain it, and it's just like, you know, some people it's like, woo, and I'm like, all right, man, well, whatever you think, you know. So
yeah, man.
Yeah.
Again, people buy into movie tropes. I mean, this is something that Zach and I talked a lot about. The idea of people watching what happens in a movie. You know, like the little guy trains enough so he can beat all the big strong guys, attacking him at once with weapons and make it look easy. And yeah, we tend to buy into that. Even if we think about it logically, we understand that's a really, really difficult thing to pull off. And yet, again, if you look at a YouTube comment section where a guy is saying something like this, like a highly trained martial artist in an unarmed against a group of much larger, stronger guys, even if they don't train in martial arts, if they intend to kill him, they probably will, unless he finds a way to get out of there as quickly and efficiently as he can. And that's often met with animosity, it's met with anger, it's met with resentment. A lot of like, no, but my Sifu says, my sensei says, you know.
So I was doing some sparring with one of my guys, and we were talking. I was doing kickboxing with him. You know, we were doing kickboxing rules, and I was working on Dempsey roll, and you know, getting real low, keeping my head low, and doing that motion. And he's a quick learner. So the first time I did it, we weren't grappling, but he jumped on me and put me in a standing guillotine. That was his thing, even though we had said, hey, we're not going to do those rules. But it showed me, I said, there's a flaw, you know. I read it from boxers specifically in the comments, like, oh, you need more head movement, blah, blah, blah. And they talk this stuff, and it's like, okay, you do a Dempsey roll, and somebody grabs the back of your head and knees you in the face, or drops a 6 to 12 elbow on the back of your neck, or you roll right into a roundhouse kick, or they grab you in a standing guillotine, or, I mean, you know, there's all these different things. A roll, a Dempsey roll, if you really think about it, it puts you in a very compromised position in mixed martial arts that in boxing...
Yeah, man, head movement is a totally different thing in MMA. And
Yeah, like,
in self-defense, radically different.
yeah, I
One of
think
those big differences is the subtleness, for example. Like, if there are kicks and knees allowed in that fight, you would not want to go lower than shoulder level with a very few exceptions when you're moving your head, and you definitely wouldn't want to lean. Like, I know Mike Tyson did it a lot to set up his left hook. He would lean on the slip step and then come back and throw his head into the movement to get a ton of power into his left hook. But that's a great way to collide your head with your opponent's right shin if they're throwing a right roundhouse counter. So head movement, again, in kickboxing is going to be much more subtle, like a twist as opposed to a lean, and again, no lower than the shoulder. So it's a similar looking thing, but it's a different animal.
Yeah, and that's, like, for me, I have like a wide, kind of a wider stance, and like I do a drop, but when I drop and I come to that position, I'm also in a wide enough position that I know if that kick comes up, I'm going to grab it and then ultimately go for the takedown. Because, so it's like those things, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So when he threw that roundhouse counter on that roll, I caught it because I saw it. But if I didn't know what I was doing, I would have eaten the kick. You know, and that's why, a lot of people give Muhammad Ali. They're like, well, he boxed all wrong because he did these back sways. So from a typical boxing standpoint, right, these back sways and his movement, that's what gave him Parkinson's. Well, they say all his junk, and it's like, okay, moving back like that is really one of the best head movements you can do, and just like quick, like to the side and swaying back really fast. Those are great head movements for kicks, for a lot of different reasons, for getting your range, for counter punching, and a lot of the guys that are up there, they utilize this movement. But so there's things like that just don't cross over because there's more of one aspect. Like, I love watching the head movement of boxing. I think it's awesome. But when you're down like that, I think it was I want to say it was Canelo. There's this clip of him where he's just baiting the guy with his head, and he dodged so many stinking punches. It was after he fought Mayweather, and they say he might have picked something up from him in his style. Anyways, but I was just thinking, like, hammer fist to the back of the head, you know, or a hammer fist to the back where your liver and your kidneys are exposed, you know, doing those drops, even in those are vital organs back there. I'll tell you a story. My dad, when he was younger, so he had a buddy, and they were working construction. His buddy wasn't getting paid by his boss. Okay, So my dad's buddy, he's like, I want you to hit me in the back. He says, I want you to hit me in the back and lay some wood on me, right? So my dad's like, all right, I'll do that. So the guy turns around, and my dad cracks him. He says, he's like, I hit this guy as hard as I could in the back. I laid some wood on him, and then he's like, oh, hey, come over here. You got hit, blah, blah, blah. So my dad doesn't see his buddy, his working buddy, for, you know, a week or something. So he gets a call, and he's in the hospital, right? So my dad goes, visits him in the hospital, and he's like, yeah, man. He's like, how you doing? You enjoying your time off? And this guy looks at my dad. He's like, you're such a, you know, he cusses him out. My dad's like, what's up? Guy lifts up his shirt and has stitches across his belly. He says, you ruptured my spleen. So my dad had hit this guy so hard, he had ruptured an organ internally, you know? So yeah. From a back shot, and there's certain ways you hit body parts, and there's a reason for some of these rules. But like I said, in boxing, rolling under like that, that's okay, unless a hammer fist is getting dropped on. So there's certain defensive movements that just don't play in the same way. You know, it's a different rule set.
Absolutely. It is so important to understand the rules of sports, or the lack thereof, and not to confuse a rule set with, say, a martial art. A lot of people ask me or simply assert that, say, MMA is a martial art. I'm like, it's not a martial art, it's a rule set. Or that Sanda is a martial art. It's not a martial art, it's a rule set. Like in Sanda, you can punch, you can kick, you can throw your opponent, but you only score if you remain standing while he goes to the floor. That's the rule set. It's not a kung fu style, right? And the same thing with MMA. It's not a martial art, it's a set of rules under which various martial artists may compete in different styles or any combination thereof within that specific rule set.
I was trying to explain that about kickboxing, right? I was like, Taekwondo is kickboxing. And people are like, huh? I'm like, yes, Taekwondo is kickboxing. I'm like, huh? I'm like, let me explain it to you. Okay? Taekwondo means the way of the hand and the foot. First off, a lot of these guys out there saying they do Taekwondo. No. You do not do Taekwondo. You do some flashy nonsense with your feet. That's not Taekwondo. Real Taekwondo uses punches and kicks. I watched this guy on Instagram, actually. I believe his name is Harong Sam. Anyways, He's a Taekwondo practitioner, but if you look at his hands, he has excellent hand movement as well. So kickboxing is a set of rules. I looked it up. I think it was the Professional Karate Association was the guys that brought it to the U.S. and made it like a bigger thing. But kickboxing is anything that incorporates punches and kicks. Karate is kickboxing. Sure. Taekwondo is kickboxing. So, like you said, it's a rule set, and people are like, no, kickboxing is a style. No, it's not a style. It is not a style.
I know, man. It always makes me laugh whenever somebody says, I've got a black belt in kickboxing. And there are schools out there who give out belts in kickboxing like it is a style. And they got like their forms and their katas and their uniforms. And I'm like, look, any ring sport where you can punch and you can kick is kickboxing. For example, American kickboxing, Japanese kickboxing, K1 kickboxing, Muay Thai, kickboxing, Savate is kickboxing, Guangyokdo, Letway, Khmer boxing, all of these are various styles of kickboxing. The rules are different, sometimes subtle, sometimes in a huge way, but yeah, it's all kickboxing. Speaking of kicking, let's talk about the axe kick for a minute. So recently, you've been getting way into experimenting with breaking stacks of concrete with the axe kick, and for the longest time, every breaking expert that I knew and I studied with way back in the day when I was into breaking would always say, you never, ever break concrete with an axe kick, just boards. Concrete is just way too difficult. It'll break your leg. And here you are stacking like stacks of like 8 bricks up and smashing them, making it look very easy with an axe kick. And I'm looking at this like, it turns out everybody was wrong. So how's your axe kick breaking coming along?
So the thing about an axe kick going into breaking, there's a couple different ways that people throw their axe kicks. Some people hit with the ball of their foot, right? Like right under the toes, they kind of their toes curled and hit with the ball of their foot. It
gives you some extra reach. Yeah, generally people think it's not as powerful, but it offers a bit more speed too.
Yeah, and that is the axe kick you want to perform on blocks, in my opinion, unless you are wearing like a hard-heeled boot or something, because drop heel, people don't realize in breaking, the edges are really dangerous. That's probably the one of the most dangerous parts of the break. Like I did a headbutt break and an axe kick break, but catching your nose, like when I was doing my headbutt, I was like, I could put more power in if it was horizontal, right? Or in my axe kick, I was like, okay, so how do I hit it without catching my fleshly tendon right there on that nice sharp piece of concrete? So
I've seen some guys get cut up during these breaking demos pretty badly.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's there. Yeah, like I've cut my hands a couple of times doing my 1-inch punch technique. My last competition, I was doing a new style of elbow break, and I hit the bone, and for weeks, man, I was like, oh yeah, I definitely bruised that bone, you know, because it's just
Yeah.
it's hitting at the right place at the right time and with enough force. And you know, there's just some guys that break arms, break hands. It's like it's a real any sport, in my opinion, where you go in there like, yeah, I could break myself really bad right now. It's like you gotta mentally prepare, like, I'm going through this stack or something bad's gonna happen, you know. So my axe kick, I approach the same way. You know, you think about it as safe as possible, and then you got to kind of work your way up. But it's really a lot of it's about confidence. And one of the reasons I wanted to do the axe kick, because like the axe kick, in my opinion, is super underutilized. It's one of the it could be a super devastating move if known how to thrown correctly. Andy Hug had one of the nicest axe kicks,
And people just assume, oh, that guy was special. That guy was a mutant. Yeah, he was special because he trained to be special. But again, people just assume he did that because he had some genetic mutation, some propensity I could never have. No, he practiced the axe kick and he put it to work. Whereas most people just tell themselves, well, this dude on the internet or my sensei or whatever says it's not a good move in a real fight, so I'm just never going to try.
Yeah.
But Andy Hug, man, he tried and he made it work. And another great fighter, Mirko Cro Cop. In fact, did you see when Andy Hug and Mirko Cro Cop fought? They exchanged axe kicks. Like Mirko threw one and Andy threw one. They both hit each other and they like acknowledged, like, nice axe kick. They touched gloves and then the fight continues. It was awesome. It was fantastic. But we don't see that move used very much these days. Not even in kickboxing, because again, people are too afraid of the risk.
I think part of that too. Yeah, it comes to the efficiency of being able to throw the kick but it's like if you can master a kick that's an unexpected kick, then it becomes even more deadly. Like I did a tier list on kicks that I like, and I actually rate roundhouse kicks low, right? And people are like, why do you rate it low? Because you see
it's so common, right?
Exactly. Anyone can. If you can't do it, if you are practicing kicks and you can't roundhouse kick, you shouldn't be kicking. Like, that's the most basic kick that everyone knows how to perform. Everyone. So when I get into these concepts of talking to people about martial arts, and I go into like a spin step, or I go into like, it's like foreign language, like, well, all you need is boxing, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, and wrestling in mixed martial arts, bro, because those are the four, bro. And I'm like, let me explain something. If you know boxing, Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, and wrestling, those, in my opinion, when I think mixed martial arts, those are the four main styles of mixed martial arts. Like, if you had to throw it down in 2 striking styles and 2 wrestling styles, I think those 4 are probably the most practiced. So you get these guys who have been training mixed martial arts 6 months and they think they're going to be the next Conor McGregor. And I've talked to these guys, like, oh, I've been doing mixed martial arts for a year. And it's like, yeah, bro, I've been doing mixed martial arts since I was 5. Like, you really want to talk about, okay, because you picked up a couple of these moves and now all of a sudden you think you're some hot. It's like, no, there's way more depth to it, and you're not there yet. So, like, calm down.
Yeah,
Watch a little too much.
There are levels to the game. Like, anybody who's been training jiu-jitsu, for example, for a while knows that, 6 months to a year, that's a white belt with a stripe or 2 on there, and that's not much to brag about, man. But it's the people who have not been humbled, and unfortunately there are many of them in the fight game, people who have not been tested. And we see this a lot. Like, man, what's his name, that internet guy who's challenging all the pro boxers or all the pro fighters to fights. Jake Paul, is that the dude? Man, he just challenged what's his name? Michael Bisping. Michael Bisping just released a video about this. He's like, I accept. I want to make millions of dollars for beating up for an easy fight. Why not? I accept. I don't know if it'll happen. I kind of hope it does. But one thing Michael Bisping said that really stuck with me was this guy hasn't been tested. Like one thing that happens with these young guys, they win a fight or two and they feel indestructible. And he says, I know that from experience because when I was undefeated, man, you think I'm a big prick now, you should have seen me back then.
Yeah.
I mean,
So,
but yeah,
going back to Logan Paul, he's him and his brother box, if I remember correctly, and
yeah,
Logan's the one that challenged Floyd Mayweather as well, right?
oh yeah,
Okay, so now here's the thing. Logan Paul, they actually had some video footage. I think Joe Rogan did a podcast, but he was wrestling with Paulo Costa. Have you seen that video?
I haven't seen that one. I do know
Okay.
that he wrestled. That
Yeah,
he wrestled in high school. He is a strong, athletic guy.
yes.
Nothing to
Yeah.
just simply dismiss like whatever. But yeah,
Yeah, so as far as his grappling goes, I was watching, I was like, okay, this guy's got some good grappling. But one thing he is pretty. Michael Bisping, he is not a pretty man. So, I mean, if you want to talk about war veterans, you look at guys, and it's not to knock the guy, because like I said, with his wrestling background and his youth, those skills are gonna play into it. But you go up against a battle-hardened guy that really is in there to hurt you. Like, I mean, man, it could go either way. But I thought it was funny that he challenged Mayweather, because Mayweather's considered the greatest of all time, and this and that, and everybody loves his defensive style.
at his own game of all things.
Yeah,
I mean, as far as Michael Bisping goes, that's Michael Bisping hasn't boxed professionally. He said in this interview, I'm an 0-0 boxer.
Yeah,
and that's fine with me. I'm a world champion in mixed martial arts, but I'm an 0-0 boxer. But I'll take it.
Yeah. So I mean, if you beat Floyd Mayweather, all right, then go talk to the big professional fighters. But Floyd Mayweather, he probably outweighs that guy by like 70 pounds. He's got to walk around, I would say 220. That's a fight I'm interested to see, because that's kind of your like David and Goliath. And if it's not a fixed fight, which I hope it's not, I approach the fight game. Sometimes I watch fights and I'm like, that just doesn't sit right with me. I'll watch fighters and I'll watch their techniques from previous fights, and then I'll watch their techniques in the next fights. Like Conor McGregor versus Mayweather, when I watched that, it didn't sit right well with me. And it's because Conor McGregor, when he throws his left hand in mixed martial arts, if you watch his left hand compared to when he fought against Floyd, I was like, you don't seem like you're fighting the same, So, and then there's the TKO, and he's not even bleeding. And then I saw him go to war with Nate Diaz. He's bleeding all over the place. I'm like, all right, okay, wait, you're calling TKO and the guy's not even bleeding yet. So, but anyway, going back to this, the big guy, Logan Paul, that would be if he knocks Floyd Mayweather out. Just with one lucky hit, that's all it takes. It would really show a lot of people age matters, height matters, weight matters, reach matters. So, it could be a very interesting end. But yeah, stay out of your lane with Michael Bisping, man.
Yeah, man, because he's a big dude. He's a skilled man. I mean, even with one functioning eye, I mean, he's blind in one eye. I'd pick him in that fight all day. Now, as far as like practical fights, these fights don't make sense as fights. What they make sense as is business ventures. And this is something I've been thinking about this a lot, because my generation of fighters grew up with this idea, like professional fighters, take every fight in front of you, never say no to a fight, never skip around a sparring, never sit out when you're tired, never take care of yourself, basically. And what we're being shown by these internet mavens right now is something. It's a very different narrative, and that is take care of yourself, which sounds very selfish and self-serving, and it is. But what they're doing, and the lesson I take away from this is something I wish I could go back in time and tell to my younger self, is be a lot more picky and choosy about the fights that you take. Because there's always another one, and there's often a better one. Like my last fight left me with a broken skull, put me into retirement, almost killed me, and that's a fight I shouldn't have taken. And if I had stopped and thought about it logically, I wouldn't have taken it. But again, I was in that fighter mindset. A fighter fights. A fighter never says no. A fighter, you know, instead of a fighter looks out for his best interest. You know, what is the best payday? And that's not wrong to think, because a professional fighter, that means you are out there to make money by fighting. And if you are, you know, just taking whatever is thrown at you as a ham and egg, or taking whatever scraps you can get, that's not the best return on your investment. Because again, you only get one of these bodies, and once it's broken, yeah, you're done. And it doesn't really matter, like, whether you start fighting early or you start fighting a little later in life. There is a limit to how long you can continue to fight professionally. Like, generally, pro fighters who have a good run at it have a career of like 10 years. You know, again, whether they start early, like in Thailand, these guys start when they're children and often retire by the time they're 20 or early 20s with like 100, 200, even 300 fights under their belt. But you will very rarely see a Muay Thai fighter from Thailand over the age of 25 still fighting. And again, if a guy starts, let's say, age 30, starts fighting competitively, that guy will often continue till about age 40. And again, it's something a lot of people don't understand. I get emails every day from young kids telling me, Ramsey, I'm going to be 13 next month. Am I too old to start training to be a professional fighter? And I'm like, you're literally a child.
Yeah.
Be patient. Just get out there and train. You're fine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And, you know, go like what you were saying about fighting, you know, for such a long time and taking fights that you shouldn't have. I mean, growing up for me, I never shied away from a fight. Like, I fought everyone and anyone I could. And, you know, as a young kid, you're like, oh, I'll walk it off. I'll walk it off. And then once I got, I don't know, probably past 25, I'm like, oh, all those things I walked off.
Yeah.
They don't walk off as easy. You get out in the, like, for me, like I said, man, when it's cold out like this, I got arthritis in my left foot from broken toes from kicking wrong, plantar fasciitis, put on work boots all day. Then you just tore my shoulder here, broke my rib there, can barely breathe because my nose has been busted, can barely chew food because my teeth are, it's like, all right, this stuff's, it's catching up, it adds up, you know. Weightlifting the same. I train I got some younger guys now, and they're really eager to learn. And I want to build, there's a fine line of building toughness and endurance in someone and just breaking them completely, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, back in the day when I was training people, I was just hard, man. Like, I just was in a totally different mindset. I didn't stop and think about long-term consequences. We sparred as hard as we could. We fought as hard as we could. We trained as hard as we could. Everything in my life was just go, 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 be as hard as you can. And, you know, we didn't have medical. We didn't have any of that. You get, you know, your ribs broken in a backyard MMA match, and you're working with broken ribs. Oh, my hand's broke. You're swinging a hammer with broken hands. And that's just how it was, you know, because of the lifestyle and what we were going through at the time, and all the guys we were just angry dudes, and we just did not care. And so now I have, you know, I'm teaching guys about how to be responsible, and I believe in toughness. Like, I'll have them hit a heavy bag. The heavy bag's not going to hit them back, right? Or whacking their arms with sticks, you know, lightly hitting hard stuff. You can get body conditioning without breaking your body. And that's what, like, people are like, okay, man, how do you get hard bones to punch through stuff? Or how do you do this? Or I said, honestly, I do a lot of bag work, like a heavy bag, or punching like into a bucket of loose rocks or something. The idea is causing enough damage to rebuild stronger. If you cause too much damage, you don't rebuild, and then you're just broken. So when I focus on sparring, I'm real careful with my guys. Now I'm like, hey, we're putting on full headgear, full this. They're like, oh, we want to be tough. you actually get your toughness of your body by doing lighter drills continuously. And then, later you can test your toughness maybe once or twice. You're still going to wear headgear, but you're going to test your toughness a little bit. But that comes later. Like, real toughness is built over just progression. Your body adapts to these things. It's like if I went out and I tried to deadlift 1,000 pounds, right, and I had no lifting experience, I'm going to tear my muscles from my skeletal structure. I'm going to hurt myself, right? But now if I progress, it's the same thing with breaking. You got to progress. So for me, I've been doing bare knuckle forever. Bare knuckle, bare kicking, everything's bare, So it just, when I do that, progressively, my bones have gotten denser over time. And then I found out about these breaking competitions, and I'm like, yeah, I can hit pretty hard. Sure, why not? And I jumped in there, with some of these guys, and these guys have been doing 20 plus years. I mean, some of the guys I competed against are holding world records, breaking through stacks of 16. Drew Serrano, one of my favorite breakers, I competed against him. He's older now, but he still breaks, 10 to 11 bricks. Really good breakers. And I mean, these guys are hardened, but they're not hardened all of a sudden. They've conditioned themselves. And then on top of it, they have all this technique. Like, there's a lot of technique where you hit the brick, how high the stack is, how much follow through you have to striking force to follow through force. There's the initial impact of the strike, and then there's the carry through. You need to find that sweet spot of having enough of both. Everything from your footing, where you position yourself, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So
this is stuff that people hate to hear. They hate to hear the truth about how improvement is an extremely gradual process. Whether it is improvement in strength gains, or an improvement in martial arts skill, or an improvement in bone density, or any of these things, they hate to hear the truth that it's a gradual process, and that you can't cram for greatness, basically, like you cram for a test. The pursuit of greatness is a gradual process, something you work on a little bit at a time, day to day, as opposed to cramming for it, like cramming for a test that you didn't study for.
So, now, as far as cramming, like longer training sessions, now, here is my opinion on longer training sessions, specifically technique training. What I mean by that, if there's a technique I want to master, one technique, one type of kick, maybe it's a Spain back kick or a certain combination, this is where I'll cram maybe 2 hours on that one specific technique, for instance, until I feel really comfortable. But then later, I'll do 5 minutes of it here, 5 minutes of there. So the cramming part of it is when I'm focused on technique. Now, this can happen in any different which way. It could be, whether I'm working on a break or I'm working on my deadlift form or I'm working on something like that. I'm really going to just focus on it for that one little time period and then just add it, but I like to think about it logically and really break down everything. I remember when I was working on my elbow break, I was stuck at like 8 blocks for a long time on my elbow.
I remember that. Yeah.
Man, I was getting so annoyed. I'd slammed my elbow through those blocks so many times. So I started watching other breakers, and I started watching taller breakers, and I started looking at the stack where it was in comparison to their hips. And I did all this film study until finally I ended up breaking, I think my best ever was 11. But my point is it took time to really look and focus on what was it? Was it mechanics? Was it height? Was it my follow through? Was it a little bit of everything? And man, I was doing everything from jumping elbow breaks to stepping over to, I tried everything till I was just like, all right, my body needs a break right now. But 4 weeks, I just spent, like, I was obsessed about learning that one technique. And so, but it paid off, I felt good. And, in my tournaments, it paid off. Same thing with my stomp. I'd been doing the jump stomp, flying jump stomp over and over and over. And I was like, okay, because of the ground, there's like my concrete, it's graded so water can run off of it. And that's where I do my breaking, is in my backyard. So anyway, I ended up,
Yeah, that's
I was
going to
like,
make a big
okay,
difference.
yeah, well, any type of uneven surface, it's the difference between connecting like this and connecting with a guy like this. Your fist could graze off his chin, or he could be churning in and get a broken jaw, or he could just sit there and you'd hit solid right on your target. It's the same exact thing. So when I was jumping up, I was landing, but my weight and my carry through was rolling my stack forward. So I ended up on my last tournament, I took first place in my foot stomp, but it was because of my setup. It wasn't that I never lacked the power, it was because my power wasn't transferring correctly. So it's just little nuances like this that can make all the difference, and it's in every game. It's in your timing and your footwork for your punching, your kicking, your breaking, your hip position on your lifting. But only someone that wants to do a little bit every day and reflect, whether it's you're watching videos and reflecting, oh, my knees were past my foot there and I didn't have a straight line of power. Even if it's just that, that is enough to constantly grow. If your body's too tired, you should be growing mentally. A lot of people just if just body, people all the time they talk, oh, you're just a dumb meathead. Oh yeah, that's funny. You must not know what goes into diet. You must not know what goes into technique, because it's like all these things are running through but it's all full of meat up there, guys, meat and potatoes. Like, are you stupid? Like, come on now. So
Yeah, man. Yeah. What was I going to say? Something about breaking. Oh, yes. I got a question today that this reminded me of. A question, pretty normal question that I get on my channel about punching power. This guy basically asked me, how important is it to develop an inordinate amount of punching power? And additionally, he was asking about like devices to measure punching power. Like, how important are those? Do those make a difference? And I was thinking about this question, thinking how would I answer this? And punching power up to a point is important in a fight. Like, every fighter needs to be competent enough at punching that they can deliver a blow to the side of the chin or the front of the chin or wherever that's going to deliver concussive force to their opponent. And that's something any able-bodied athletic person is able to learn. It's not some special magical gift, but there are a bunch of variables and nuances of movement in a fight when the other guy starts moving around and his position is now different relative to his, and perhaps his head is at a different angle, your hand is at a different angle, and so that punch with the knockout power grazes off of him, or he's moving back a little bit, and so it doesn't hit him with the same type of power as if he were moving toward you, and so on. Again, the nuances of position in so many ways are so much more important than the explosion of increased power. And I think that that's one thing you demonstrate so beautifully with these breaking techniques.
yeah. So going like you said, with positioning and timing, you have, right, if a guy's coming into you and you hit him, even if you hit him lightly, his force and your force are connecting, right? So
Yes.
if you have a 5 of force, he has a 5 of force, now you have a 10 of force. Now if you're throwing a 10 but he moves back 5, then now you only have a 5 of force that's actually hitting him, right? Same thing in judo. If you're doing judo, my judo instructor, he's like, okay, you have a power of 3 and you go up against a 7. Head on, he's always going to beat you by 4. But if you take his 7 and redirect it with your 3, now you have a 10 and he has a 7. So punching power, like when I do my 1-inch punch technique, right? That is all about perfect alignment of structure. Perfect alignment of structure. When you connect, knowing how to position your body in a way like a lot of people talk about the 2 big knuckles, right? I actually break with my small 3 knuckles. If you look at your fist, right, going like this, the spot, right, your 2 big knuckles, if you look straight down the barrel, there's nothing behind your 2 big knuckles except for your thumb. There's no line of power there. Your 3 little knuckles go all the way into your elbow, and then into your shoulder, and then into the leg behind your shoulder. So hitting with the three knuckles causes much less chance of rolling your fist in general. So when I
There's more surface area.
yeah, there's also more, exactly. But the kinetic link is so much better with those small three knuckles. You know, a lot of people are like, hit with the two big knuckles. I've never hit with my two big knuckles. I've always, but because it's natural. So going into the kinetics of something, like I said, you learn about all those ranges of power. Like when I was messing with the stack, even on my 1-inch punch, I realized if I get a little more body drop, is what I call it, dropping my body into it, and hip torque at this height, whereas if I raise it too much, because it's such a short distance, I don't have enough time to generate velocity. So I need enough time to generate velocity to break the first couple of bricks, but I also need enough hip torque and body drop to break through the last couple of bricks. So it's that it's that proper connection at the proper impact. So you got all your different forces combining. And same goes for a punch when you're punching a target. It's the difference between like a thrust kick and a teep kick. A lot of guys, when I see them do side kicks, they hit at the end of their chain of power. And what I mean by that, their leg is fully extended. When I throw my side kick, I actually have my knee as high to my chest as possible, and I hit with my leg about halfway extended. So, but I get impact force from throwing my body into them. So my impact force is actually me lunging into them, and then I'm using a full leg extension right after the impact force. So now I have my impact force, my pushing force, and right at the end when my leg is fully extending, I twist my hip outs to get that last bit of, so I'm hitting here, but all my follow through carries, and I've send people flying with that kick, no problem. And it happens quickly and instantaneously. But I'm not going to use
that. I got hit with a kick like that last week while sparring, like one of these like Bruce Lee style stepping side kicks with a friend of mine I was sparring with, and he just blasted me across the cage. We were sparring in a fight cage, and I just like slammed up against the cage panels, and I was like, man, did I just get kicked with a Bruce Lee stepping side kick? Man, those people who hate my Bruce Lee videos would be so happy about that. But yeah, it just makes me think of one thing I hate about martial arts communities is how incredibly dogmatic people get about this stuff. Like, my instructor taught me this. I was taught to throw the side kick this specific way, which admittedly is an effective way. But there are like 5, 6, 12, 20 other effective ways to also do a side kick or a punch. Like, one thing I was thinking about as you were describing the mechanics of breaking with that 1-inch punch, which is one of the most beautiful breaks I've ever seen in my life, by the way, is this old martial arts axiom, one of the wisest things that I heard in traditional martial arts training, which was this: hard weapons against soft targets, soft weapons against hard targets. So going back to 2-knuckle versus 3-knuckle contact, again, in martial arts like karate and taekwondo, people will often be taught to hit with the 2 big knuckles. And if somebody ever suggests 3-knuckle contact, they will scream, heresy, blasphemy, you can't say that, that's wrong, my sensei taught me otherwise. But you have to understand the context. 2-knuckle contact, this is a hard weapon. It's a hard, sharp weapon intended for soft targets. So if I'm punching, say, the neck or the body right under the ribs, that's a great weapon. For a shovel hook, yeah, bring that up in there. If I'm punching a hard target, like the jaw, for example, where it's got this ridge right here, where if I get right between the 2 knuckles, that could cause some serious damage. I've seen guys bust up their hands in horrible ways, you know, punching technically correct with 2-knuckle contact or otherwise to the jaw. But the 3-knuckle contact, if we think about it, that's a soft weapon, if you will. I mean, soft, I'm using that term pretty loosely because you're hitting somebody hard enough to break stuff, right? But it's a soft weapon because it's got this big surface area, kind of like a palm strike has a big surface area. That's also a soft weapon against, say, a hard target like a bone, right? And again, with these concrete blocks, they're hard targets, and you're using that softer weapon, if you will, with a three-knuckle contact, or with the ball of the foot with the axe kick, as opposed to the heel, which is a hard weapon. Whereas, say in a kickboxing match, we're going for maybe a clavicle strike with an axe kick. Sure, you're going to use that heel, right? But what if you're striking the top of the head? Maybe something different.
Yeah, and that's because I do a lot of my training in shoes, because self-defense. If you're trained for self-defense specifically, you need to learn how to use a shoe. I always tell my guys, they really don't realize a proper shoe is the best self-defense tool you can have. So like my sidekick, going back to my sidekick, going to the body, I'll use the heel of my boot, right, and turn my toes towards me, or I'll use the flat of my foot to push with the bottom of my foot. But if I'm going low, my whole mechanics change, because typically when I go low, I'm going to the top of the knee and I'm chopping down this way, and I'm using the side of my foot to get that nice ridge of my boot, and just drive straight down, right? But the way I use that, I'm completely locked out. And the reason I'm locked out is because it involves, when you're locked out, you know how hard it is to push on a locked out arm, right? Because it's all the joints.
It's a solid frame. You're fighting the bones instead of the muscles.
Yeah, exactly. So when I frame with my sidekick, it's different. So it's like somebody's coming in, I just lock out my leg and stick it out real quick. And what it does is it creates a frame with my leg against their knee. But that's a defensive sidekick. It's not an offensive sidekick. Now, if I'm lunging into them, then I'm going to use my offensive, where I use my quads to drive my kick. So if I'm just leaning back, I'm using the body, the drop of my body weight, and then I'm just sticking out. So there's different types of power that can be utilized in different situations. And people are like, that doesn't work. It's like I was explaining my spinning hook kick. I did a kickboxing combination, and I was explaining why I like using a spinning hook kick instead of a spinning back kick, or a spinning back fist, or a spinning hook punch, which you don't see often. But so a hook, right? A hook punch, it's all rotational force, right? You're churning your body. You're using your core. So a hook punch, you could connect here, all this, right? You have all of this range to connect with that hook punch. From here, right, it's not going to be as powerful from here, but you can connect in all of these. The same with a straight punch. But this way, moving left to right, you can use a hook kick the same way. So even if your opponent moves left, right, or backwards, you're covering this whole long arc. Whereas a spinning back kick, you have to look over your shoulder, point your butt at them, and then fire in a straight line. So you're essentially spinning, stopping your spin, and then throwing your kick, right?
Jordan, I'm going to tell you a secret about the turning back kick. You don't have to look. And this makes a lot of people on the internet furious. I made a turning back kick tutorial about how to actually land the things. And in this video, I teach people you don't have to look. And I got so many angry comments like, no, the World Taekwondo Federation says you must peek over the shoulder first, otherwise you will not be able to see. I'm like, dude, I'm blind in one eye. I can't see anyway. So, you don't need to see over your shoulder in order to target the thing. It's the position of your feet. If your feet are in the right position, you'll be able to hit. So, little pro tip right there. Get your feet in the right position relative to your opponent, and you will hit them every time, regardless of what you can or can't see. But again, people get furious about this stuff because it's different than what their organization taught them. Yeah. That's actually something I learned from Chuck Liddell. Chuck Liddell put on a seminar, and he's teaching the turning back kick. And again, he's telling you, all these martial arts organizations say peek over the shoulder. I don't, because by the time you spin around, he's still going to be in that same spot a fraction of a second later. If he was there before, when you saw him before, if you peek over the shoulder and take that extra time, that's just extra time he has to move away. So you might as well just throw the kick if you're in the right position to start with. And mind blowing when I heard that.
The worst one that I see that is is when they throw the back kick with no setup and they peek over the shoulder. Because like you were saying, like for me, I know my positioning, but when I'm teaching the guys, they'll throw their back kick but they don't control the spin. And that's why I was saying the difference between a hook kick and a spin kick. The hook kick, you're utilizing all of the arc of the spin, so it gives you more options of hitting it. But whereas a back kick goes straight out. So they have to know their aim and be able to control the spin. So I make them look, because when they just throw it out there, it'll shoot off to the left of the bag or the right of the bag, or they'll graze it. I'm like,
here's another secret, Jordan. Another secret about the spinning back kick. It's not actually a spin. And this is what everybody gets wrong. This is why they have so much trouble aiming the thing, because they spin. It's a turn. It's a turn. And this might sound like being really nitpicky with the language, but it's very important to understand the language in order to teach the technique. The difference between a spin and a turn, the difference between a leap, a hop, a jump, and whatever else, right? But like you said, it should be a straight strike as opposed to a spin. And if we spin and put rotational force into it, thinking if that's going to add more power, we simply throw ourselves off the mark. But if we make it a simple turn, right, a simple 180 turn, then it becomes a straight punch with the leg, if you will, and then it lands on the mark, and you can hit a dime on, like a dime-sized target on a heavy bag or a human being every time without fail. But you got to turn.
Yes, and so when I'm having them slow down, I'm like, okay, look, because it makes them pause for a second. But then when they go to spar, they look and they turn their butt at me. I'm like, I see that coming every time. Like, you need a setup stop throwing the kick where I can see it every time. I'm like, they're like, are you there? Are you there? Where are you? And I'm like, yes, I'm still here. And stop looking at me. Like, throw a roundhouse or throw something out there, but or wing and roundhouse kicks. That's the other one I see all the time. It's like, no wonder your kicks get caught all the time, because kicking should be just as complex in your setups and everything. Taekwondo doesn't get enough respect in that. Like, those guys are so good. The ones that only spar with their feet are so good at doing their feints and their setups with just kicks. They're like boxers, but with their feet. So I believe a good kicker, you should not just wing out one kick at a time. It should always be utilized in combination, like a punch. Unless it's like maybe a teep or a side kick, something like a jab where you're trying to gauge your range. Because I'll do that a lot. I'll just throw a teep out there, a side. I'll be like, okay, they're in my range. Now I can set up for a combination. But a lot of times, they throw it out there because they're powerful. And like, if I land this one big shot, and even the pros do it. And it's like, nah, man, you set it up a little better, because they're easy to read, and especially when it's just a roundhouse kick, or one of my favorites, Billy the Jet, man.
Benny the Jet. Yeah,
not Billy. Benny the Jet.
Benny the Jet Urquidez, yes.
Oh my goodness, man, his kicks, phenomenal, and he was a point fighter. He was like, I think before he did full contact, he was like a no contact point fighter. But he understood distance and timing and all that. And his kicks, he knew how to set up, and he was good at it. And it's just like, man, just learn the setup for the kick. That's all you need. Just a good setup, Don't be doing no spinning stuff if there's no setup. Don't ever turn your back if you haven't done a setup.
Yeah, man. The only thing you should advertise in a fight is a fake. Yes. That's it. Otherwise, man. Let's change the topic a little bit, man. Before we had this podcast, I was actually butchering an animal, and I was thinking, yes, I was cutting up some meat, which is in the previous segment we were talking about how people often tend to remove themselves from menial tasks, like that's below me, that's beneath me. And while you were saying that, I was thinking, like, I wonder how many people out there like butcher their own meat. Probably not that many, because again, we go to the grocery stores. It's all cut up for you. It's somebody else slaughters it for you. You don't have to think about that. And I remember reading this vegan meme for, trying to convince people to be vegans, and it said something along the lines of, if you had to butcher your own meat, nobody would be a vegan, or nobody would eat meat. Everybody would be a vegan. And I was like, well, no. Some probably would go that way, but no. But at the same time, it did bring up a really interesting point, which is how far removed we tend to be in modern culture and modern civilization with modern technology from the most basic needs, such as preparing food, and or just working, like you were talking about, being a carpenter. In olden times, that meant chopping down the tree, that meant cutting it up, that meant hauling the wood around and doing this very difficult physical work, whereas today most people think, oh, I'll just go over to the hardware store, have them chop it up, and then I'll nail it together. So these are different things.
So yeah, going back to like butchering your own meat, animals like sometimes cows would slip, fall, break their leg, whatever, and you can't fix them. Their leg's broken. They're no longer. They're broke. So you got to put them down. And I would put cows down, and I'd string them up, butcher them, get my own meat, all that stuff. And one thing I will say about butchering and cleaning your own animal, whether it's fish, whether it's any, it actually makes you respect the animal more. You're like, dang,
yes.
like I killed this animal, and now I'm eating it, and I took this thing's life and it's dead, and I'm eating it, So what? Yeah, like people that talk about the morale of eating meat or being a vegan, like I get it. A lot of people want to be vegan for whatever purposes they find great, and there's bigger problems in the world. Bottom line, veganism isn't going to save the world. It's not, because there's all I tell people all the time, like, is it going to stop the nukes? No.
Yeah, the problems of the world are much more complex and nuanced than what people put in their mouths, man.
But
at the same time, and I've got to be really careful about the way that I word this. Maybe not. I think everybody should have the experience that you were describing. Everybody should have the experience of essentially killing an animal and understanding the ramifications of that. Specifically, killing their own food.
It's like, that goes to the same idea of, oh, I'll just get a gun and shoot them. Oh, really? Because you might get caught and you might go to prison. It's people are stupid. They do a lot of this, and it's like, really, you really don't understand what you're even talking about right now. Like, you've really never been in a fight. You've really never had a gun pulled on you. You've really never pulled a gun on someone. You've really never killed an animal. So shut up, because you're stupid and you don't know what you're talking about. And that is the biggest problem with humankind today. People talk because they have this idea of something, when in reality it's so much different than what it actually is. And it's like, we're so lost as a human race right now of what's right and what's wrong and what should be tolerated and what shouldn't be tolerated. And it's because you have all these people that want their way and they want respect, yet they have no respect for anything at all. They just, essentially, they want to turn themselves into gods. Is what it comes down to.
Yeah. It's a different thing, man. When I was 9 years old, I got a fishing pole, a used fishing pole, as a birthday present. And my mom took me out to a lake to go fishing. And so I'm fishing, and I catch my first fish that I caught all by myself, without any help from anybody else in my life. And I'm so happy and proud of this moment. And then it comes time to clean this. And my mom's like, okay, take care of it. And I'm like, oh, nobody's going to do it for me. And this is the first time I killed a fish by myself. And it was kind of a gut-wrenching experience. I was like, but, and I'm looking at this thing and it's wriggling around, and I'm like, but it's alive, and I'm having this moral conundrum. But after the fact, I realize, exactly what you were describing. This respect for life that doesn't exist without that experience. It's an experience that so many of the people in the world never get to have. And this probably sounds horrible to all the vegans out there who are like, "It's murder." Yeah, yeah, you were literally murdering an animal in order to feed yourself. Anytime we eat something, we have something else has to die, whether plant or animal or all the microbes attached to that process. Something dies, usually more than one thing. And it's again, it's an experience I think everybody really needs to have. And even vegans, plant eaters exclusively. Man, when I was a kid, I grew up in a small farming town, and we killed gophers. Why? Because if you don't kill the gophers, they eat the crops. Now, we're not killing gophers to eat them. We're killing them to save the crops so people can eat plants, so people can go to the grocery store and buy produce, because otherwise they'll destroy that crop. And I remember the first time, setting gopher traps and seeing these things all bloody and dead, caught in these blades, because the blades, they like jam into the gophers and kill them. It's kind of gross to see. And as a child, I'm seeing this, understanding the circle of life. We don't eat without killing something. And unless you can develop and I've seen people go both ways on this, people becoming callous to it and people developing a certain respect, a greater respect for life because of it. So
I think the bottom line, right? Like, is it comes to, yeah, like you said, that's a reality check. You kill gophers to have crops grown, or you kill snails so they don't eat your tomatoes, or something does die. And there's as humans, we have the greatest responsibility on Earth. We are the only animal that can, or creature, as you will, that can destroy the whole world 10 times over, just with our nuclear weapons. So, we the problem is, like anything, it comes to doing things responsibly. I'm all for. I saw this awesome documentary. It was Little Big Farm. Have you seen that movie?
no.
Okay, so essentially, they have like a farm that's they call it, they create like a mini ecosystem. So they don't kill any of their snails. Like, here's one of the things they did: snails infested their crops, but they also had a ton of ducks which love to eat snails. So instead of them killing the snails with pesticides,
So they outsourced the killing.
Yeah, they let their ducks go in and
to the ducks.
Yeah, all these ducks came and killed all these snails, but in turn, the ducks then produced better eggs or something, and then they had a gopher problem. They had been killing coyotes. They stopped killing their coyotes, let the coyotes come into their land, and started killing the gophers. So it's this whole movie about, just proper farming techniques, and they just let the animals and plants kind of be, and what they count as a loss, they count as a loss, and when they count as a gain, they count as a gain. And they realized that when they were more diverse, they were actually gaining more. The problem is greed. We have all these one types of crop where they continually till the ground and they make the nutrients go out of the ground. They never do any type of different crop, and then it just eventually erodes.
And they never let the ground go fallow, man.
Yeah,
they never let the ground go fallow. That's a word city slickers don't know. Fallow. That's when you let it go wild. Basically, you don't grow anything there. You let nature take over for a while, return the nitrogen to the soil.
Yeah, and I think if everything was practiced a little more responsibly, like, it would just be a better world for everyone in general. Like, in my area, deers run amok.
Yeah.
You hit them with a car because you're not allowed to hunt them. They got rid of their natural predators. They're like, save the deers because we want to save the deers, kill the bad predators. That's great because now
I place the blame on Bambi, man. It's all Bambi's fault.
Stupid Bambi. Anyhow, so like now a deer jumps out in front of your 16-year-old daughter's car. She swerves off the road and dies. Oh, you saved the deer. Great job, but now your kid's dead. So it's like you could go either way. why don't just let nature be nature? Don't overhunt, don't overkill, don't overproduce, don't over everything. Like if we worked on a free enterprise system and everybody just traded fairly, it'll never happen because people are too greedy. But yeah, I believe I'm all about like just I have a little garden in my backyard. The snails come, let the snails come. And I said if they get too crazy, I'll make escargot. I don't care. Like, you know, it really doesn't matter to me. But yeah, I've had a lot of meat eaters. Oh, I can't believe you killed that animal. If you don't like killing of animals, you shouldn't eat meat. Like if it bothers you that much, don't eat meat. I'm gonna eat meat because I find it's necessary for what I do. Like as far as how I train, everything. I've heard a lot of people are vegan for 5 years and then they fall off because they realize, wow, this really isn't that good for my body. You know, so my teeth, I have canine teeth for a reason. You know, why did I have canine teeth? I got teeth that chew veggies and I got teeth that tear meat. So
some angry person is going to jump in the comments and say, well, apes have canine teeth, gorillas have canine teeth, and they're predominantly vegetarian. But you know what they use those for? Fighting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
gorillas use those big teeth for fighting. Especially fighting over mating rights, which is something humans don't do that either. I hate it when people try to anthropomorphize gorillas because, you know, gorillas are similar to humans in lots of ways, but they're so dissimilar. Do we want to live in a society where men are biting each other with our canine teeth to win over ladies? I mean, that doesn't sound like a place I want to live.
I hate to say it, but if you watch animals in their mating regimes, so you want us to eat like vegetarians and maybe we should just go and rape and pillage too. Because most male animals, they like lunge onto the back of the female and the female's like trying to fight them off and the male just rapes the female animal. Oh, so we should just be like animals then. Great job, guys. This
is one of the sobering realities of many, many animals, many primates, in fact. Baboons, for example. Baboons and sea turtles are some of the worst perpetrators of gang raping their women. Man, baboons have these full-on wars with other clans of baboons, and they rape and they pillage and they steal the women and the children and kill the men. And baboons are terrible people. Baboon society that would not fly over well in human society. I mean, human societies that acted like baboons, we're not big fans of that as human beings.
They eat plants, so they're okay. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, man. Baboons eat almost anything, man.
Yeah.
There's a town in South Africa. There's a fascinating documentary on it. You can see it on YouTube, where some people moved into this town not knowing that it was previously inhabited by baboons. They built a city. The baboons moved up to the hills and watched and waited and bided their time and observed these people watching their daily routines, thinking, oh, this when they get back from the grocery store. This is where their food is available. These baboons jump in this guy's car, carjack him, steal his groceries. They do home invasions, steal these people's food right out of their refrigerators, head back up to the hills, and then watch and wait and observe and study, figuring out their next raid. I mean, they are raiders, man. Baboons are not good people. They're highly intelligent, but they're not good people.
Yeah, man, apes are pretty strong. They are a scary creature if they were mad, biting and how strong. I think they said an average chimp is like almost 10 times stronger than a human, pound for pound or something
so
ridiculous.
Much stronger, man. So much stronger. I mean, even like a gorilla. A gorilla is like, I believe, an average adolescent female gorilla is 6 times stronger than the world's strongest man. That's some statistic I heard. Maybe it's not entirely accurate, but it's not far off.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some very, very powerful animals out there. I think we were talking about that in our conversation. You were saying you get a lot of comments about the way fighters look. So what?
Yes.
What?
Yes.
So What were you?
I'm always being told, you don't look like a fighter. That guy doesn't look like a fighter. Some of the best fighters in the world hear this all the time. You don't look like a fighter, because they're expecting an action figure. They're expecting an aesthetic physique like a bodybuilder or a comic book superhero. And then they see a guy like, say, Jeremy Horn. Jeremy Horn looks like a pretty normal guy. He does not have an aesthetic physique. He's got some extra body fat on him. I mean, if you didn't know he was a multiple time UFC champion, 4-time world champion in various mixed martial arts organizations, and you didn't know who he was, you'd just think he was an average guy. But again, the skill that this man has belies his physique. If you look at a guy like, blanking on the name.
Fedor.
Okay, Fedor is a great example. Again, not an aesthetic physique, one of the greatest fighters of all time. Dude who beat BJ Penn. He's a jiu-jitsu guy. Ryan Hall. Ryan Hall. You look at the guy, if you didn't know he was a great fighter, you'd think, this guy looks like a nerd. And he's got a similar thing that I have, a genetic predisposition to blink a lot when he talks. And people look at him like, he's not aesthetic, he's not big. He doesn't look like a fighter. I bet he gets that all the time.
Yeah.
But
so
it's
there for me, like I always tell people, my genetics, like if you look at all the guys in my family, I did a video on it and I literally posted picture of my dad in his 20s, my uncles in their 20s, and all of them have these big broad shoulders, barrel chested guys, and 5'10", 5'9", nowhere under 200 pounds. That's just my genetics. But I people have this idea that these super ripped physiques, right? These guys that are really vascular. I did a video on Athlean X or whatever. He's another
Jeff Cavalier, your new nemesis.
Yeah, Jeff Caviar, very fancy guy, very fancy, pretty guy. Anyway, he was talking about athleticism, and he got smashed by all these other guys that are real athletes. And what I mean by real athletes, that guy has an aesthetic physique. An aesthetic physique does not translate to all-around athleticism. All-around athleticism, you need to have body fat on you. People don't realize a little bit of body fat, I think it's around 10 to 15% body fat, is ideal for athletes, because all fat is stored energy. And the reason that you want to be strong, but being strong and being aesthetic are not the same thing. Powerlifters are strong, and a lot of them are not aesthetic. And really, the strength that you need to have as far as martial arts go is you got to be able to deadlift your own body weight, right? That is probably the most basic thing. Bench press, not too worried about. You should probably be able to bench half your body weight for a lot of reps. Shoulder press.
And this news upsets a lot of people. Like, what? Bench press isn't that important, but it's the first thing all the dudes go to in the gym. Yeah, I know. Yeah. It really isn't. It really isn't. But in Jeff Cavalier's defense, yes, I'm going to stand up for the guy here. And here's why. When you are a fitness trainer, if that's your job, that's how you make your money, and you are not aesthetic, people don't take you seriously.
Yes.
Which it sucks. It absolutely sucks. But if you're not aesthetic and you are a fitness trainer of any type, if you're a man anyway, if you don't have the vascular muscles, if you don't have peaks on your biceps, if you don't look like that, people will not hire you. They absolutely won't. And so again, that's where I believe he's coming from in that department. Yeah. But again, with women, it's different. With women, it's basically if you look the way that your clients want to look, that's where they'll hire you. And but even athletes who understand this, who understand I'm not a bodybuilder. My sport doesn't require me to get dehydrated and make my veins pop out and have peaks on my bicep. It's about how fast I can run or how hard I can hit or whatever. Still, we're just mentally predispositioned to seek training from the aesthetic guy as opposed to the non-aesthetic guy.
I think part of that comes down with our genetics, and I know that sounds weird, but I've asked this question to a lot of people. I've asked women and I've asked men. I said, okay, I'll show them a picture of a handsome guy, with muscles and all this. I'll ask women. I'm like, do you think this guy's handsome? They're like, yeah, I think he's handsome. And I say, why? And it's, oh, well, he has muscles. And then you ask a guy, you show him a woman, you say, you think this woman's good looking, and she's got whatever qualities she has, right? So it's like animals. Animals, they are specifically in tune. Typically, certain birds have big feathers. Peacocks show off their feathers. Lions got their manes, blah, blah, blah. So there is a genetic part of us that views muscles and relates them with strength, or views big hips on a woman and says that woman will give children, or whatever. That is just part of our genetic code, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's when they start selling something like something for what it's not. Selling aesthetics for athleticism, or selling athleticism as aesthetics, it's not the same thing. Now, like I said, an athletic physique it can be a lot of different things. And same goes for aesthetics. I like aesthetics. I don't mind aesthetics. I think aesthetics play a role in fighting. We talked about that on our last podcast a little bit. Looking intimidating is a psychological factor.
It does.
Yeah, like
it does, man.
That's why in the street, everyone thinks a bodybuilder is scary. They see a 300-pound muscle juice head, they're like, dang, that's a big dude. Yeah. Like, he's jacked out of his mind. And instinctively
they see a dude with washboard abs, and instinctively, again, they're going to think, man, this guy's put in a lot more work than I have.
Yeah, so for me, I focus on aesthetics, but my aesthetics are backed by my strength. Like, that's not just my main goal. And aesthetics for looking scary are different than aesthetics for, like, for instance, if I see a bodybuilder because I'm trained, I look at a bodybuilder, I'm like, oh, you're 300 pounds, so you're going to gas really quick. I don't want to let you get a hold of me, but I know your blood pressure is probably through the roof. You probably don't have the greatest cardio, and you got a lot of muscle to carry around. You're probably going to tire quickly. Now, if I see a guy, he's got really big shoulders, maybe he's got a small chest, he's got a thick core, not a skinny trim core, a thick core. I'm like, okay, that's a core that's been built on lifting heavy things, because a thick core is what's necessary. He doesn't have a big chest, but he's got big shoulders, so he can probably punch, and he doesn't need a big chest. Oh, and look at those traps and that neck. Those traps in that neck tell me he trains his neck, which means he can probably resist a knockout better. And then you see he's got a wide that spread. Oh, that means he's probably really good at wrestling. And then you see his quad. Oh, he can probably grab me and pick me up and throw me on the ground. I look at a person, and that is how I look everything from, are his pants sagged right now? Is he wearing a belt right now? Is he in flip-flops, or is he in his shoes? Is there something I can grab? Is he wearing, what type of jacket is he wearing? I look at somebody and I instantly will profile them if I think they are a danger to me. And that's just natural. So when I look at a man and I'm like, okay, I judge him by his stature, the way, it's a natural instinct. So having aesthetics isn't a bad thing. But going back, it is not necessary to be athletic. Fedor is a perfect example. Guys, plenty.
Another great example, Zabit, with that unpronounceable last name that he has. A couple years ago, when the UFC was here in Shanghai, I went and watched that show, and Zabit was there. It's the first time I saw him fight, and he was fighting, I don't remember the dude's name. He was fighting a dude that was super aesthetic. Dude looked like a bodybuilder. Dude looked like an action figure. And you know how Zabit looks. Looked like a skinny, lanky, scrawny nerd. And my wife and I were watching this, and my wife is like, before the fight starts, like, yeah, one of these is not like the other. I think the skinny guy's going to get mauled. And quite the opposite happened. We see this dude just flying all over the place, mixing beautiful striking and kicks, and he does a suplex and some beautiful wrestling and transitions into submission fighting, and he's just all over the place, controlling every aspect of the fight. And I look at my wife, she looks at me like, no way. No way. This guy's physique belies his abilities in such a massive way. But he's got that wiry strength.
Yes. People don't realize that strength is more so like there's muscular strength, but tendons are super fine muscles. And if you have tendon strength, bow and arrows, right, that were made by Native Americans weren't made from muscles. They're made from tendons, because that tendon strength is what gave the ability to draw the bow and give it firing power. So strong tendons, good strong tendons, a lot of times, like I used to do rack pulls, really, really heavy, 1,000 pounds, 800-pound rack pulls. People are like, oh, you're only moving it 2 inches. Yeah, stupid, but my grip strength holding on to it, and that's elongating my tendons, and on top of it, it's putting pressure on my skeletal structure. So even though it's two inches, as soon as it's off the bar, gravity has taken place. Welcome to gravity, guys. And they don't realize that I have the ability to hold on to 800, 700 pounds for a long static hold. So me grabbing you and squeezing someone and I'll just hold you there and squeeze you until something cracks or you're just out of breath, and I'll just hold you and I'll just keep holding you, and you're just, oh, he's just holding me, and that's all you got to do. Just a good old bear hug. It's funny, you know?
I love rack pulls, man. I love rack pulls.
Great.
It's as long as you're honest about what that lift is, what it's for, and also unracking like a heavy weight on your back. I would definitely recommend get the safety bars under there if you're gonna do with unrack more than you can actually squat. But it's essentially shaking hands with a weight that is much more than you could move. But it again, if you're honest about what that is, you can train your grip strength, you can train sticking points in a certain movement, and again, it shocks your system into feeling a weight that would ordinarily kill you under normal circumstances. Yeah. It's recently I listened to a podcast with Wim Hof. I mean, this guy's all over the internet with his Wim Hof breathing method and surviving sub-zero temperatures for prolonged periods of time and whatnot. But I started listening to some doctors trying to explain this method, and essentially what it is he breathes really, really deeply for a while, then he holds his breath for an extended period of time and essentially tricks his body into thinking that it's dying when it really isn't, in order to trigger a massive response from the immune system in order to harness these seemingly superhuman abilities. And I was thinking about that, like, man, there are all kinds of things in life that you can do to essentially trigger responses like that. And one of them is lifting heavy things, which I absolutely love to do.
Well, like, it's the same for breaking. Like, I notice, like, when I'm doing my training for breaking, when I go to break something, people are like, why do you yell? I had my niece, she came over, and she's 12, probably 11, 12. Yeah. And she's like, why do you yell? Right? She looks at me and I can tell, she's testing me, as little kids do. I'm like, why do I yell? She's like, yeah, I don't understand why you yell. So I look around and I go, ah! She goes like this, right? She gets all startled. I said, what'd that do to you? She's like, that was scary. I say, okay, so if I yell when I'm attacking someone, think about what it does to them, because it affects their auditory, right? A lot of these kias, hiya, all these kias, all these stuff people do, they don't realize that if you actually did yelling, like you yell at somebody as you strike, you're not just concussing them. Because if you hit somebody, they say there's a certain decibel of sound that you actually stop learning when you hear that. Like, it's such a high pitch that your body will stop learning. So, Bruce Lee, he had this really that sound he made, that super high pitched. It wasn't a yell. It was a high pitch frequency. And I think, and this is a theory, he didn't write about it too much. I think he utilized that as not only a distraction, but at the same time, that high pitch, if you had ringing in your ears and then you get hit by this high pitch, it's almost like an audio attack. It's attacking your audio frequency. It's messing with the way you learn. It's intimidating. It's scary. So like loud sound, it's the same when a bear attacks you. You raise your arms up to make yourself look big, and you yell at, oh, and sometimes the bear will run away. It's happened before. So
yeah, man, the power of the voice is one of the most underutilized things in fighting. I mean, self-defense schools talk about this. The good ones talk about using your voice, like making sound, getting attention, intimidation, etc. But the power of the voice in combat sports, it's one of those things very few people touch on. Now, what's legal and illegal about this? It is illegal to use foul language in a cage fight. It is illegal to have unsportsmanlike conduct. It is not illegal to speak or shout in a fight. And a lot of people are very confused when fighters do this. Like, you don't hear it from a lot of them because generally they tend to hiss or hem and haw or whatever. But you see someone like Holly Holm, and when she fights, she's screaming when she's punching and kicking. And, the folks at home don't necessarily hear this, but her opponent definitely does. I mean, you see some professional cage fighter running at you, screaming as they are striking at you. That has a profound psychological effect on you.
Yeah.
And then imagine even further, say somebody has you in back mount, they're attempting to choke you. What if they scream something in your ear at point blank range? I mean, that's not illegal. Nobody does it. It's not illegal, though. I imagine if somebody starts weaponizing that, it will become illegal, however.
Yeah. Well,
man, like screaming in somebody's ear, that's terrible. That sucks.
I can vouch for that because right now I have a 2.5-year-old that just wants to yell at everything, like to get, she just gets excited, my daughter. Oh, and the other one is not even a year old. So how do babies get attention? They scream and they make it as obnoxious as possible. So you pick them up, that's what kids do. But like Khabib, he's a master of it. He's a master of talking to his opponents in the ring. He was saying his recent fight in an interview with Justin Gaethje, he said he got hit with a couple hard hits from Gaethje, and he said, I remember looking at him, and I said, is that all you got? And then he's like, when I saw that he gave me everything and it didn't faze me the way it wanted it to, he got scared. So, or when he was fighting with Conor McGregor, he said, you want to talk now? And he kept beating him. You want to talk now? And he kept beating him. And I've seen this in,
Muhammad Ali did the same thing, man, when he fought George Foreman. Same words. George Foreman had Ali up against the ropes, and he's throwing everything he could while Muhammad Ali's doing his rope-a-dope, rolling with the punches. And they clinch up, and Ali famously screams in his ear, is that all you got? Is that all you got? To which later George Foreman admitted in an interview, and then I realized that was all I had.
Yeah.
At that point, he realized he was defeated.
Yep.
Not when he became physically fatigued, but when he was mentally broken.
Yeah, and like Conor McGregor, going back to him, he does it pre-fights. He tries to get into people's heads pre-fights. So it's everybody has their own. Mike Tyson would just stare, and he just said, never lose eye contact. I remember Alexander Eliaminko, he went up against a super buff bodybuilder, and this guy was yelling at him, but Alexander I think he had just gotten out of prison, and he was like part of the Russian mob in prison or something. And he saw this big
He'd seen some things, man.
Yeah. He saw this big guy that was on steroids yelling at me, and there's like this meme, and he's like, you just woke me up from my nap, because Alexander's just looking at him with this stone cold, like, I'm going to murder you. Like that was his face. So there's different ways of doing it, but it plays a big role. It plays a big role in lifting, in breaking, all of those things, So I think it's definitely underutilized.
One thing I've learned about YouTube recently is that there are a lot of ex-cons who make a living on YouTube because, again, in the US anyway, it is very difficult for an ex-con to get hired. It's very difficult. Like I used to work for a U-Haul, doing some maintenance on the trucks there, and when I got hired there, um, I had a really hard time finding a job up to that point. And I remember asking the boss, like, why did you hire me specifically? And he takes me to the room, shows me the stack of applications, shows me their computer, and he's like, all right, you see these 300 applications right there? These are ex-cons. These are our last resort. We're going to skip those. So we move on to people who don't have criminal records first. And I'm thinking like, man, it must be really, really tough to get a job as an ex-con, no matter what the crime was that they were sentenced for. But I realized a lot of these dudes make a living on YouTube now as motivational speakers.
Yes.
And some of these channels are amazing.
Yes.
Really, really intense guys, but I can tell right away they saw some things, or more specifically, heard some things. Like they experienced people getting up in their face and trying to do the monkey dance in every which way to intimidate, to try to express some form of dominion over them, and they're used to it. And it's not a big deal anymore. Whereas for the average person, if you have a boisterous, rambunctious, over-the-top type of personality screaming profanity in your face, most people will just kind of deflate and not understand how to deal with that on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. And like a lot of when it comes to dealing with with those types of individuals, they have there's that saying, there's all bark, no bite. There's certain people that are really loud and obnoxious, and they can back it up, and then there's certain people who are just loud and obnoxious, but when they're challenged, they step down. So it really, that a lot of that comes with personality, because I've seen guys that are just wild and loudmouth, but it's because they know how to fight. And then I've seen other guys wild and loudmouth, and as soon as you check them once, they're like, oh, whoa, I shouldn't have done that, So yeah, man, I've been watching. I watch a lot of ex-cons on YouTube.
There are so many of them.
Oh man, and some have
so many good ones too.
Deep wisdom. They just do. It's like, people, they look at convicts and think that they're, here's the thing that gets me about convicted felons and criminals in general. So there's so many people, right, that think, for instance, voting. They go to their vote, their boxes to vote for whatever they believe in. They sign on their paper, blah, 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 blah. Oh, I want this, I want that. And then the outcomes is a 50-50 chance. And really, in reality, you don't know, because you don't know if those are rigged or if they're not. And if the powers that be are really even there, it's just making you feel that you actually have a choice, right? Maybe you're like, oh, I have a choice, and you feel special, right? And you really think your stupid little pencil marks make a difference. Some multi-billionaire who probably has his hands in everybody's pockets. You don't get rich by being a good guy. You get rich by being a criminal, whether it's a criminal on Wall Street or a criminal on the streets. And I tell people that you do not get that rich without somebody getting screwed over in the process. So the thing about criminals, really, if you look back at Britain, okay, when Britain was a world power and the Boston Tea Party, who were those guys? Oh my God, Ramsey, they were criminals. They were criminals and rebels. Oh my goodness.
And traitors to their own country.
Traitors. So you're saying
George Washington, man, biggest British traitor of them all.
So the first American president on the greatest country in the world, you're saying they were criminal traitors, Ramsey? Oh my goodness!
Man, my mother is British, and she's a history teacher, and I grew up in the U.S. with a British history teacher mother, and so I learned American history from two very different angles. In America, George Washington, the greatest American hero. From the British perspective, the polar opposite. So it's all a matter of perspective, really. It is all a matter of perspective.
you read about Thanksgiving. I remember in school, I read about Thanksgiving and the Pilgrims, and they draw like these guys, and these nice hats, and everybody's having a dinner, and it's a party and great. And I'm like, wait, you're saying they slaughtered the native? Oh my God, this is a horrible holiday, and then you get Native Americans today that celebrate Thanksgiving. You realize what you're celebrating, right? Pretty much the slaughter and the taking of your land. Like, great for you, man. Like, so I don't. A lot of that
Thanksgiving
stuff
has a really storied history. I mean, but way before we associated with the Pilgrims and the natives having this fictional friendly dinner together or whatever. It wasn't really celebrated in the United States until the Civil War. And it wasn't until Abraham Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address after that he actually instituted it as not so much a national holiday, but he strongly recommended that Americans get together to give thanks. And then this was a tradition that was sort of forgotten up until, I think it was Eisenhower. Somebody correct me in the comments, but I think it was Eisenhower who said, let's kind of revive the tradition of Thanksgiving, but we'll make it more of a family-friendly get-together sort of thing, because that's what America needs right now. That was his idea, and that's when it became the turkey dinner sort of get your family together occasion. Whereas, before that, I mean, it went through different waves of coming in and out of fashion. But yeah, now Thanksgiving is, it's kind of a complex socio-political mess is what it's become.
Yeah. One of the things that gets me about just Thanksgiving, Christmas, all this stuff in general, it's like, people, like, I had people at work, are you going to get me a present for Christmas? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to get you a present for Christmas. If I'm going to get you a present, I'm going to give you something because I like you. Like, I hear people, I got to go shopping for all these presents and all this stuff for people I don't even like. Well, you're an idiot for celebrating Christmas then. Why don't you just buy stuff for people you like? Like, I've never understood the whole idea of even a birthday. Like, why give gifts on one, like my daughter, my kid? I'm not gonna it's only for your birthday. No, if I think you're a good
There's
kid.
so much irony in that as well, like begrudgingly giving gifts on Christmas. I mean, Jesus Christ, Christmas, named after this man, literally said, if you give a gift begrudgingly, there's no point in giving it. I mean, he literally said those words.
No, Ramsey, you're gonna have hate in the comments, Ramsey. No. Don't do that.
What do you mean, Ramsey? That Christmas is actually a Christian holiday that's based on... Yeah, man, let's...
The trolls will come after you. Trust me, Ramsey. The trolls, they come in troves. I can fight a lot of them, but...
I know. Trying to remove Christ from Christmas. It's silly, man. It's silly. I don't care what you believe religiously. I don't care what you believe as far as deities, but if you look at what Jesus actually said, man, the man said some stuff people need to hear, and that's one of them. If you give a gift begrudgingly, there's no point to it. So make sure your heart's in it.
Just remember what Jesus thought about people overly taxing. I'm pretty sure he had some ropes and he was flipping some tables, okay? So everybody can get mad at the criminals. He's like, those guys didn't pay taxes and they're criminals. Hey, you know what? I knew a man, and supposedly he was a perfect man, and he was flipping over some tables and he was taking care of some business.
Indeed. Taking care of those corrupt individuals trying to get rich at other people's expenses.
I know.
All right, man. Looks like I need to be headed to bed here pretty soon. But Jordan, thank you so much for making the time. I know you got up really early this morning. You are an early riser, but it's the weekend for you, so I appreciate your time. All right. Again, folks at home watching this podcast, check out Jordan at Red Chucks. His YouTube channel is Red Chucks. I'll put a link in the description down below. Awesome individual, great videos. Go show him some love. Anything you'd like to say to the folks at home before we check out?
Oh man. Hey guys, remember, breach the great firewall of China, because that's good.
Indeed. All right, folks, thank you for watching. Now get out there and train.